The Ring of Dain Thar Duin, Book 3. The 5 sons of the hawk bring burning to their flock. Vain are the many gatherings of man in both times of want and plenty, for he of all the tribes of the earth desires his fellow to witness his charity, that he might be praised for it, that the goodness he think of himself be seen by other men, and in that praise be lifted above them, to sit in a seat higher than theirs, and gaze down as men praise their bounty. Many beasts lavished upon the table for a chosen few, as others without are left to dream, largesse being but the desire to be seen as bountiful, found in small gatherings and great hosts. That desire remains, declaring some imagined value to others, that they would place the value of objects in the person of the giver, granting some imagined right to stand above them, to order them against those who would dare stand as tall, who would dare order men as they did. There is but one mark by which man shall be judged. With such wanton feasting were Kelach, the otter, the sparrow, and King Etheldor's agent greeted when they came into the great home of that lord. The lands of the Uncultabar are rich in plenty, where sweet rains from the sea fall in summer months. Well received were they, and though much aggrieved at the news of Gallion, Etheldor gave to them cups and swords, as though he were a king equal to the dead Malach. The Hawk King received from them the ring which Gallion surrendered, as well as his confession to murder. Kelach saw the ring which had adorned the hand of Malach, and, remembering the vows made upon the wedding bench of Hala, fretted not at seeing that boon passed as a trinket from servant to master, knowing that no man but Malach's could wear it safely, and if any hand was to hold it before he found Illulian, those of the Telach of the Uncultabar were best. Thus in idle feasting did time pass, glory resting beside the hearth, and all great deeds of their sword fathers remembered in the passing of good company. The land was wild and dark beyond the reach of their spears, floundering in blood, but in their own fellowship set many great. Each night as the surround fell into a hushed silence of fear, and a stillness came to Eoland in anticipation of new cruelties, the Uncultabar crowded in the hall of the Telach, and raised their mead cups in cheer, and heard each night as the sparrows sang songs of sorrow and spirit. Satisfied sighs filled the hall as revelers drank each word. The otter led the warriors of the Hawk King Etheldor, bringing into security tracts of land great, and tribute from Tela, clans, and family from the surround, that the hall of the hawk was gilded, and he wore a circlet made of gold, the Ring of Malach set upon his finger. Many were the offerings which the Hawk King would give to his favored warrior, but these were always refused for the otter's love of harsh living. Not alone was he in his refusal to surrender to luxury, for Kelach came but briefly to that place, though for his arm he was given lodging for all time. Kelach rested in the hall only when wounded many times over. He spoke nothing of his journeys nor battles, and stayed in the happy hall only so long as his wounds were tended. The bone-hilted sword which was given him by the high Telach, Malach, was never far from his hand. With much of the lands of the Western Isle, the ring of Malach king and a circlet of wrought gold set upon his head, the Telach Etheldor named himself High Telach, the Malach, king over kings, master of the Eolish, only the second in all time. His word held the weight of iron behind it, and people many and fearful walked not in his land but gave it birth. Many paid to him tribute. Most of the Unlondar were his supplicants, and the Unbolam also. The Drochtbalon were his blood friends, and the many peoples who live in the mountains of the west held him high. The city of Arel Salam noted him not, holding that only Malach's blood might rule the island. Other Telachs saw Etheldor as the strongest of their number, appealing to him as judge, but never kneeling to him. The great king had 5 sons by his wife, the eldest Adelwitz, and the youngers named Elis, Edrioen, Emeric, and Ethelwald, each strong and powerful in both mind and body. And so 5 years from when he had received the boon, as he could not choose between his sons for he that would next become Telach and receive tribute, he gave them command to seek renown and make a name. And to the son which would bring back the greatest gift and greatest fame would go his seat. Adelwitz was a man full grown at the time of the command, and left in search of a wife that would give to him a family, and by them secure his father's favor. He left the lands of his fathers, and sought a wife worthy of the first child of the Hawk King. He went not into lands which paid tribute, for he had reasoned that he could not gain the seat unless he gained new Tella under his patronage. So first he went to the Unsalal, who were not supplicants to his father, but meekly avoided his might. Though he spoke to the Tella assembled with grace upon his tongue, they refused to treat with him, for among their number was Noreen, long returned from the ford with one who would not reveal his face. Each morn they would leave, not returning until after the sun had set, and none knew where they went in those hours. Noreen led his people in their refusal, for to him it was wrong to give the flower of their Tella to others. He ordered his father the Telach to withhold from the hawk's son any hospitality in the lands of the Tella. Adelwitz left Unsalal lands swiftly, knowing they were set against him for all time. He went to Ar el Salam to plan anew. He knew not what his brothers had won in the days he wasted, and feared that they would soon win renown from their father. He came to speak with those in power of the city, who had long kept the Hawk King's influence at bay, and spoke to them in good, clear speech. Elders of wise discourse, I have come to you with a grand future for your city. Though I give you neither gift nor homage, but the spirit of friendship and a future honor beyond all other dreams. My aim is to give to you more than I would have you give me, and by such vows entrench our utmost care for each other. I am the son of the master of this land, for though you do not send to him your tribute, in all things you consider his thought to avoid his ire. There are many Tella who follow such rules of defiant supplication, for to trigger open conflict with the Unkoltabar is to call down the faithful servant of the hawk, the otter. Yet where in the land the Tella resist us by their contentious Aeolish spirit, the great city of Ar el Salam refuse out of another spirit of the Aeolish blood, that of loyalty. For when the great King Malach came into these lands, you gave to him your fealty, vowing that only that king or his heirs might rule over your free city. I am not of his blood, nor shall I or mine ever be. That line was ended in treachery. Before you stands a new line. Once again shall our people be ruled by kind and fair judgment, but there are yet many people who live beyond their reach, far from their protection. So I have come to offer this to you. Pledge to me loyalty and give to me a small purse of coin, that I might set out from here and find for myself a worthy bride. Grant me this, that I might follow my father and rule all our people. For no gift that my brothers shall bring him will equal a Tella and the greatest city of Eoland. And should another be chosen for my rightful seat, then we together will march and win it by force. Deliver to me these things, and as your high Telach I shall deliver 3 boons. First, I shall make my hall here in Ar el Salam. You shall be outcast no longer, seat of the Telach, and all my supplicants shall come before you. Far richer for my being here, and more so, for my second boon shall bring all peoples along the Aglah Salam under your protection, that yours will be the great river of our isle. Third, by decree all coin minted in the lands that hold me as high Telach shall be done in the city of Ar el Salam. Thus he laid plain his dream to the men who ruled the town, and they debated the merit of his words. Many among them thought little of his friendship and desired not to send warriors to serve him. Of the 15 men who were permitted at any time to call themselves elder in the city of Ar el Salam, 9 stood against him. The oldest of the elders and their chief wavered in his thinking, seeing safety in one path and glory in another, And to his ear came one Ragnach, a man moved by the boons offered as the lure in a trap. Old men should not have greed left in their heart. Rather it should leave them when their sex does. For greed is the sin of a young man. The old should not be wanting but giving. As black cancer did greed worm into his heart, driving him to commit folly. For Ragnach was trusted in council by the chief, and by his twisted tongue convinced him to his party. 6 of those who had opposed Adelwitz came to join the chief. Thus the elders agreed to back the would-be Telach and furnish him for travel. East Adelwitz went, a wide berth given to the barrows of Halla for fear of powerful curses waiting in the fogs. He aimed for the lands of the wee Agla, hearing tell of a woman of highest blood. A month from leaving the city he came to the lands of that people, where the violence which had plagued the land from the death of the high Telach was writ plain. Crops failed with regularity, and the lands were themselves ravished by war parties. Between the peoples and families of the Tella itself was their strife, and the word of their Telach Rololoch Gwynner Dwi carried no weight behind it. He was a warrior and adventurer, who in his youth had left Eoland and travelled to the lands of Urol, where the great kingdoms of men are. He served under many banners and many kings, returning to the Green Isle with wealth and fame, and the kings of those far places did send to him envoy, pleading for his skill. When he returned, he took the place of Telach from his cousin and ruled with a hard hand. But a fist made to rule warriors is poorly made to rule in other times. The mood of his Tella became unruly, so when Malach came to receive his submission, when Rololoch Gwynner Dwi desired to fight, his people refused and made him supplicate himself before the great king. A man of proud conquest, he would not receive a son, having daughters only, to his wrath. So to these lands of strife Adelwitz came, but to the hall of the Telach none would take him. Loyalty extended no further than the edge of the tilled fields. Bands came together and broke apart with the change of the wind. He went to a farmhouse first to learn all he might. His host took him eagerly, for he had with him the coin and food from Ar Salam, which he gave freely, charming them. A fortnight he stayed with them, until they swore to him loyalty and promised to bring him to the hall of the Telach, that he might entreat with him. Guarded now by local men, the band moved through the lands slowly, that they would not be suddenly set upon, their number small. As they approached the hall of the Telach, battle became prominent. No tree unmarked by violence, and crops grew no further than shoots, torn from the ground by hungry hands. A lake lies near the shore of the sea, fathomless, to which all water of the wee Agla land gathers. Aglach Dramorla, its name. Only a league distant from the shores of the lake is the hall of that Telach, so that to take a wife from that house he had need to pass near the lake. With him 20 men of skill, loyal to his purse, he rounded the lake, but there found 100 armed brothers waiting by the shores to slaughter and defile those thirsty and seeking respite. As soon as the bands came in sight of the other, blows began to fall. Adelwitz and his men carried their arms in hand as they traveled, but the band of Carrion was resting, the lamentations of their captives unceasing. Adelwitz's band close together as a hedgehog when threatened. Vultures caught unawares pecked at the spines but could spill no blood, so well defended was that creature. So the eager scavengers were repulsed with loss, but those more cautious armed themselves and rained bolts upon the shields. Covered in their dark armor, and with rending axes in their hands they began to break the wall, and pulled men out to slay. Adelwitz did not permit himself to be trapped so, ordering his people to break apart in a sudden motion, and came against them in a blinding fury. His action of swift violence frightened them back, and he reached the captives and freed them without the loss of a single warrior, felling 20 of the bandits. Again under their shields, their band advanced into the center of the camp and slew those who drew too near to them. Coming to the great fire which burned there, Adelwitz had his men free those held captive. Some of these gathered weapons and struck at their captors, though many had no training or skill with these, and died. Others went and freed more, or else set fire to the camp, sowing confusion through the vultures, but not through the ranks of the band. As chaos expanded her reign over the camp, the 20 held firm. The great chief of the camp, who called every man cur who ran, led a small number who had not fled against the wall to cure their flagging hearts. Yet men who reave and defile know no bonds of true warriors. For those who harm the unarmed and fight for spoils in sudden raids cannot know the duty of an Aeolish warrior to die upon the field. So this chief came against the wall of Adelwitz, and though of terrible strength, he knew far better how to harm the innocent than how to fight men of courage. Adelwitz cleanly cut his hands from his body and forced his submission, and the raiders fled the camp in fear, scrambling to take all they could before vanishing. Adelwitz then gathered those burdened by their spoils and slew them for their lust, and freed all those held prisoner. He then gathered them together and went to the hall of the Telach. To the hall of that king came the party of the disparate. He at their head seemed to them Mathred reborn, robed in the blood of foes and unable to defeat by mortal means. To they who long since surrendered their hope of rescue, the swiftness and ferocity of their deliverance seemed to them a feat belonging to a true hero of the past age, or that of the Baith. A crown was made for him, woven from the flowers by the shore of the lake, golden and blue, and spoils of the camp divided among them, mead and sour Aeolish wine. This troop, much cheered by their freedom and drink, went to that hall in the spirit of a festival. A great shout went up in the crowd, so loud that Telach Rololoch Gwynedd Dwi heard it clearly from his hall, and wondered what new mischief brigands had sown in his lands. Such a procession had not come to those sombre halls in many years. The Telach, fearing them, called his house guard together. Yet Adelwitz knew the strength of the king, and had come for his favor and for his daughter. So at his word the revelers knelt to the Telach, swearing fealty to him as their right lord. Uncertain of such a peaceful act, the Telach nonetheless welcomed them into his hall, feasting them. When the meager mead which he had was all spent, the Telach Rololoch felt no more fear for those newly reconciled to him, and held Adelwitz as his brother, a great spirit who did great deeds in the most just way. Adelwitz judged that as they held each other by the arms, the Telach would not refuse him any request, desiring to take his oldest daughter as his wife. Here the mirth of Rololoch died, and he spoke. You have in this day proven to be a warrior of skill and kindness. Freeing a captive people who are not your own is noble, and to do so with so few men under arms. Only the Bear King Mathred could have done so much with less. I beg of you to withdraw this most poor request. For if you leave my hall with naught but what you have won yourself today, you shall not want for that which you need. She who you have claimed as your wife is dear to my heart, and still a child of but 9 years. If you seek to gain my friendship for your reward, this has already been won. In returning to your lands, you will be greatly renowned. But there is more in your desire. In taking my daughter, you think that the Wiagla would become a subject people. Such things shall not come to pass. If you take her from here seeking this false dream, you would soon be betrayed. I will permit no such union for my people. The High King Malach has named outlaw all men who seek wife-taking. Leave this place on the morrow. Go where you will, but not to our lands. You shall have our friendship, but not our supplication. Should in 7 years you still seek a bride, and if you are such a man which she would desire, then I shall happily welcome you as my son, but never before. With his refusal given, the Telach left the revelry, thinking that Adelwitz was now bound to friendship. Yet it was then that the noble character of Adelwitz fell away, and his true black heart revealed. He feared that his brothers had already accomplished feats worthy of fame and returned to their father. He had not the years to wait, not knowing what gifts his brothers brought to his father, but that none would outshine an entire people, no longer to be brought over willingly, but subjugated. Adelwitz went to those men who had escorted him through the land and fought beside him at the lake, and prepared them for deceit. When morning came, the band set off from the hall, returning to their home and pledging friendship to Rololoch. Adelwitz was not in their number, and they told the Telach he had set out before the sun in order to find another gift for his people, hoping for the eternal friendship of the wee Agla. They went from the hall and came to the site of the battle, there waiting for their chief. Adelwitz waited till his band left, and stealing drew to the bedchamber where the family of Rololoch still slept. There his cunning and greed did not permit him to leave with only his prize. He took from there each of the Telach's daughters, and their mother also, for he saw value in her as a hostage. So with sword to the throat of the child that was to be his bride, he forced her silence and slipped away unnoticed with his many captives. His band cheered at his appearance, for no easy feat it was to take so much from the famed Telach. With speed they left that place, knowing that once out of those lands their safety would be assured, for Rololoch had little sway within his own Tela. His warband would be small. To the city of Arel-Salam the band prepared, moving only at night that they might be lost to their hunters. Far from the lands of the wee Agla they ran, a path not as the raven would fly, but as the hare would scurry, before they found their allies, where they were greeted by dark tidings. The Telach, warrior well-travelled, Rololoch Gwynedd Dwi discovered swiftly his family was taken, and knowing at once Adelwitz had betrayed him and been false friend, he sent word through the Tela. Friend and foe alike learned of the plight of the children. Their wrath kindled. In the lands of the wee Agla the cry went up, the people united against the crime to their blood, words soon passing beyond their borders, so that all the Aeolish knew of the treachery. Those who had long let their hate fester against the mighty Uncoltabar now summoned their warriors and made known their outrage. No true high king could let loose a son so foul, and even they who had revelled at his demise held high the example of Malach. War bands of those Tela met in outrage shared, and began to press against the lands of the Hawk King. For the first time an army led by the otter and lifted by the music of the sparrow fled the field. And Kellach, knowing that which was fated for him who falsely wore the gold, the ring of good fortune, travelled back to his hall, that he might spare their total destruction. Elis, second of the Hawk King's sons, and but 1 year younger than Adelwitz, was in temperament calmly measured. He desired not the seat of his father, but when called upon to test his right, he went from his people's land, for his duty was forged in his blood, and he would not betray it. So Elis met his father's favourite, the clever otter which led his warriors, beseeching him that he might learn how best to reward the Uncoltabar. To him the otter spoke. I desire neither gold nor power. I love only wisdom and all her glory. Though I am from her separated by great distance and have little knowledge of her greatness, in that holy light I do strive to stand. A man may love many things, but together a people have need of only food, glory, and song. To secure these for a people, one only needs that light, and his people shall have happiness. So, Elis, to give these 3 gifts you need only procure one. Speak to the singer, for no man on this isle is wise if he is not wise. Many times I have spoken with the sparrow to learn from where his power was born. Though chattering bird chirps sweetly, in its eyes I see the truth, and know that his gift was bestowed upon him, that he has not always sung as a songbird. Go, Elis, that the wisdom he found might guide your people. To the sparrow went Elis, eager to learn the strength of him well praised by the great warrior. not imagining that he who had sung to the warriors in his father's hall was one so strong, as though finding the creek in which he had played as a child was fathoms deep. The word-whispering wind which he had listened to was born of a great gale. He went to him and begged on bended knee for the sparrow to aid him, though he was a servant of his father. In these last long years, since the coming of the three strangers to the lands of the Unkoltabar, this Tella knew not the gift bestowed upon it. The otter had fought 100 battles for his bread. In him was gained a warrior of unmatched quality. He has led our warriors to double our lands and made us stand tall among all the Eolish. Kelloch, too, is a warrior of skill, though since the burning of that exalted hall his fire has left him. Yet though he failed the first lord of these lands, he has proven a boon to his second, for we know not where he walks, but that his works do heal this land of the ravages it suffers. Thirdly, there is you, the sparrow, of these three the least famed. I had often heard you singing in the hall of my father beside his warriors. Little seems my knowledge now, that I learned how highly placed you are by another, who I had known to be greater. The power by which you have protected our warbands was unknown to me. Foolish it seems now that I saw not your veiled knowledge. I seek now to right my thinking and properly venerate that which should be placed above all martial prowess. Sparrow, teach the son of he who has guarded you, that I might protect this land. The sparrow was jealous of that which he had been given 5 years past, and had not spoken a word of where he had learned true songs. Yet in his wisdom he knew that he must perish as all men must perish, and that wisdom is not wise unless shared among men, for such was the lesson which the child taught him. Ellis must know from him that knowledge would not perish, and so he spoke in reply. Poorly spoken, if I was meant to be flattered, but had you the means to persuade me, then you would not have come seeking wisdom at all. Well said instead, if in presenting yourself to me your design was to be taught. Humble is he who seeks to learn, a haughty student cannot. Well placed is your humility, for I had not your meekness when I was taught my true place. 5 years past, mere days before I came to this hall, I went to that land of sorrow beneath the hill of Hala, where I had resolved to sing, for I was well known in the lands of the East, and in my arrogance I knew that my voice would give sleep to those long dead. There, in the midst of my singing, I did see a child sleeping in the flowers upon a mound, unnatural and taboo. The foolish girl brought to me a rage, and I scolded her, but was quickly humbled before her. I learned that true power contained in the child of Hala. So you have come to me and begged for the power with which I have been vested, but I cannot bestow it upon you, for it was granted to me. Should that power become yours, the taboo must be broken. You must ascend the hill of Hala and receive from her this boon. Ellis, thus guided, left his people without ceremony, and wearing but woven flax, seen off only by the sparrow. He came not to the homes of others in his travels, but lived beneath the shelter of trees and ate the poor fruit of the land. Word flew through Eoland that the children of the Hawk King Etheldor had left their hall, suitors to power, rumor swirling of their deeds, that his brother Edelwitz had gone to the Unsalal to gain them. As his brothers achieved their feat, no word came home of Ellis, for he desired to safely find that which he had in secrecy learned. A month of slow traveling after he left his people, Ellis came to the land of Barrows. It was no more a green place. Grey mist had settled over the smallest of the graves, the sun dismal and mourning over those hills. Ellis feared some new misfortune had befallen the dead, that the land be so changed from the memory of the sparrow. Ellis entered the land about Hala prepared for battle, knowing not what he would face in that land devoid of man. Ellis but the fourth to enter since the burning. He walked through the mounds as one prepared for sudden violence, peering into the grey gloaming. Yet never did it fall upon him as he went past growing mounds, till at last he stood upon the very hill of Hala. No shape or figure could he see about him. Mist pressed close. Doubt awakened in him that if such a child had ever walked the barrows she did so no longer. her great power beyond his grasp, his people given to his brothers. Ellis surrendered to this feeling, and did weep, in weeping abandoning all hope and vanity for his own glory, accepting that he would serve and not be served. A time he did spend upon the hill of Hala, alone in a sea of mists, alone but for the dead, and when it seemed to him that haze of the sun was beginning to fall to the horizon, he did leave that place. To return home and meekly obey was now his fate. But as he passed beyond that barrier of mist, he heard a great cry, more terrible than any he had heard before, as though a hind lay dying, her voice lifted beyond all mortal sounds until it became the sky above him. He fell to his knees in terror, so afraid at the rending sounds he abandoned his arms to block his ears. His breathing labored, and his legs would not obey him. The cry entered his heart, his body, his mind, and as it did he yielded to it. All his soul turned to that sound until he could do naught but wait to be relinquished by it. As he fell to its rule, it seemed that the cry was sundered into two, one a snarl, cold and violent, that he knew not its like on the earth, and at the same moment a high note, the pained scream of a woman. In the heart of Ellis a war was waged in that hour. It seemed to him that he could do naught but flee, for he had seen little of war and less of the island, having only listened to those who sat about his father's fire with flowing mead and wagging tongues, as they wove tales of the glorious battles which were etched into the halls. But he had no knowledge of the deed. Here, without earthly goods, he crouched in terror at the mere sound of battle. Yet he could not flee, for above the bellow of that vile maw he heard the death throes of the other, shrill and unwavering. Eternal damnation belongs to him that does not succor the desperate. No Tella could he claim to turn so wretchedly from such a call. Ellis could not move till both cries died a ragged death. His breath uncertain, Ellis stood and returned to the mist resolved, glad to die nameless and unashamed. Mists covered him, pouring from the barrow tops and pooling at his feet, as Ellis crept as a hare under the shadow of wings, arms forgotten beyond the boundaries, resolved to lay his life-blood for her he had heard in the mists. Foul wind, born from the ragged breath of some bloody bellows, stifled him. The mists swirling about him, pulled in and pushed out. Conjured apparitions, veiled by haze, appeared before him. Warriors long past, with wounds still running, gazed upon him from the threshold of their barrows. Some walked beside him as guides, pointing to the path on which he could not fail. Still others fell and were felled with the birth and death of the ragged winds. The procession followed him, guiding, watching, and dying, till at last they followed no further, falling away to mist, and he stood at the foot of the hill of Hala. Before him the maw of a damned wolf had broke through the door of the grand barrow. Rotted teeth dug into the ground with rabid biting and snarls. A tongue too long lapped at the feet of a child, wounded with many wounds, faint and falling, as above the doorway a fog king of such great splendor gazed in despair. Ellis rushed to her side, pulling her beyond the reach of the hound. He tore his clothing to bind her wounds, and gave to her water from his skin. The wolf of sin grew in fury, gnawing madly at the stone which restrained it. He knew not how he might battle the beast, whose rotten fangs were as large as a warrior's sword, whose oozing tongue was as a whip. All he knew was that in his arms was the weak child who had taught the sparrow. She shivered in his arms, cold to the touch and weak of breath. Ellis knew little of the lands beyond his father's grasp, not ever knowing such pain as was writ plain upon the child in his arms. He knew not how to heal her wounds, nor how to battle the ravening wolf, casting his gaze about in desperation for a weapon, but none lay near him. In panic he cried out to the Fog King, begging him to leave his seat and give desperate succor. He rose, a regal half-formed figure, descending the mound in powerful stride, paying no heed to the maw until he knelt before Elis, his face featureless rolling smoke, and placed to her brow his wind-blown fingers. In an instant she awoke, a wild scream of pain racking her, and grabbed hold of the earth below her. From her fingers mighty roots tore through the earth, tangled brambles snarled the beast, its tongue stabbed by thorns and rolled as twine back to its mouth. The roots leaping followed it, growing over the door, blotting the beast from the world beneath the brown roots, the weight of them forcing the rabid maw back. The stone door lifted from the earth by them and set anew in the frame and sealed shut. In an instant the howls of the beast died, and the king vanished in the winds. The child spoke to him, her eyes firmly shut. Great Mother, I know not why you hold me now as I have not been held since the raising of these barrows. In these many years you have not given me the compassion of an embrace, nor the healing you have given me now. Long have I sought your love for me. The blood which you have given my ancestors is strange and powerful, so far removed from the bonds of family which men forge. Never before have you defended me from those creatures which wander beneath the sleeping earth. Great Mother, if this kindness is not short-lived, take me to my resting place atop the barrow, else return to your people, and I shall, when ready, climb my father's grave alone. The child fell silent. Elis lifted her and trembling took her onto the mound where the Fog King had once sat. For it is a great taboo to tread upon the grave house of the dead. At its peak he found the bed of flowers which the sparrow had told him of. As he placed her down, the sun burst forth from the haze, assuming its rightful royal place, chieftain of the sky and seer of all things, and beneath its rays a smile danced upon the child's face. The flowers and grasses grew wildly. Elis waited for the child. Still he did not understand that which he had witnessed, but not wanting her to think him in bad faith for acting as her great mother, kneeled beside her and began to speak, shaking still in fear for treading upon a barrow. The story of his life he told, of his father the Telach, of his brothers four who still sought the prize of victory, of his favorite green grove, of melodies in mead halls, of his now abandoned desires, of the sparrow, the otter, and Kelach, of the battles won, of warriors he knew who had not returned, of his hunting dog, till at last he knew no more of his life and fell silent, gazing upon the outstretched sky. She spoke as he ended, not opening her eyes nor rising, but still in measured melody her voice came to him. In debt I am to you, Elis, son of the Telach Etheldor and of all the Aeolish most kind. For I have not known the decency of living men since the hill above us was ravaged. Above us is set the sun, that only goodness which I have been granted. For my father will not permit the sun to shine over his diminished kingdom when I am from him. It is he who calls the mists which shroud his people, mourning in my absence. Fear not his wrath, for he delights to find me here and will not curse you for standing upon his howe. I have been to my home little since the mounds were raised, these lands long left gray, for I have learned the power within my blood, and I am made to test it. Long have I walked the dark, sunless lands beneath the barrow, where pale demons walk on many limbs and eat with many mouths. Long have I given them battle as my great mother watched. Hidden knowledge my reward for victory, death in defeat. Glad I am for you, second of the sons of the hawk, first in courage. Your kindness stands apart from these weary years. When a life is spared, a debt is owed. I now happily place myself in your debt, and shall eagerly pay it. A debt is an iron chain and unbreakable. Elis, you must know that I am Ilulian, daughter of Malach, last of Atella, missing daughter of a second, and heir to a terrible third. Speak my name and I shall come to you, as my debt requires. Her eyes opened, wounds now healed, and in sunlight seemed an ordinary child. Elis was moved to pity, seeing how much had changed for her since the sparrow had learned a piece of her power. So he replied to her kindly for the payment of his new credit. Ilulian, child of the true high Telach, I have need for repayment of this debt in this very hour, or in that hour when you from your wounds are healed full. I shall not add to your burdens until you are fit to carry them. Yet it is fitting that you should know the task with which you shall repay me. We shall leave this place to its quiet morning and misted rest to walk the land which your father ruled, the land which is yours by right of blood. The land of the Eolish has fallen far to the twin plagues of distrust and desolation. You have told me of the great pain which has been your fate for so long, pain no man has yet known. I have but little power, yet I shall not permit such a terrible crime to continue when by my life I may stop it. I vow that you shall know nothing but comfort until you are full grown, protected by my people to the utmost end of our strength. We shall travel far through the lands of man, far from the woods and barrows. We shall sit by fires and in mead halls guarded by guest right. We shall hear the songs of the many Eolish Tella sung by sundered voices. Then with understanding shall you know the peoples of the land and the soul of Eoland. I will labor to place you above all others, and the right of your blood fulfilled, and your power as a shield for them. We will give these next years to carry their troubles for them. In time this land will again have a high Telach. Ilulian rose from her bed smiling, and gave to him a single dawn flower from her bed. A smile grew sad, and she turned to the east. She spoke slowly. It is a kind thing you offer, to leave this place and go to the isle. It is right that you say I should be among my people, who by laws ancient are mine to rule. Alas, I cannot. Laws set by power beyond my knowledge by my great mother bind me to the land of the Baith. I am being readied for their works. They do not want to lose me. I think there is a day coming when I will leave these sad hills, but it is not today. This flower I give to you is the dawn flower, for which I am named, and in its petals I place my power. Carry it with you, and it will order the isle as you need. Go and give that aid to the people of the isle, and know I shall watch over you as I can. Yet beware the wound which walks the isle, for I am not strong enough to hold him. I fear his touch, and as he feels joy, I feel dread. Go, Ellis, and know that as I learned the power of my blood, facing demons in the other world, I will remember your kindness. She sat back down on the flowers and would not move no matter how Ellis pleaded with her. And so he left her, angered that he could do nothing for her. Passing the barrow's boundary into the world of the living, he was glad to walk again among the lands of man, the grey mist returning behind him, the soft mist forming a wall, so thick that even with a torch the outstretched arms vanished. Ellis did not go south to the land of his Tella, instead walking west in the guise of a beggar, thinking how to properly serve the Eolish. He reached Aglach Ulmo, which bears the water Aglach Salam brings to the great still lake of Eoland of the same name out to the sea. But where the first river flows in quiet dignity from its rise, the Ulmo thunders its course, gleefully crashing upon its rapids, raising mischievous din for pleasure. The people of Eoland had long crossed only at Aglach Salam. When Ellis stood upon the banks of that river, it sobered, as a drunk servant at the arrival of his master, and he crossed without challenge. Upon the other bank he turned to see the river thundering again. Wondering at such a miracle, he took out the flower which Ilulian had given to him. A petal fell from the stalk and was washed away by the thundering water. Ellis wished that the Eolish would never be troubled by the swift water again, and as he wished, a seed of the earth sprouted beneath his feet, bending, twisting, but flat as it crossed the water, until it buried itself in the soil across the river as a living bridge, so wide that 3 men could walk abreast. Its branches grew on the sides only, and not where men would walk. weaving between each other until a guard spanned the bridge entire, that no man could fall from it. A second petal fell from the flower. Still further he went, as Alice searched for the proper place to walk among the Aeolish, for he sought to ensure his aid was not spent among thieves and raiders, but in the company of those who still remembered the peace and desired to see it returned to the land. So he came to a farmstead of meager means in the lands of the Unbolam, there offering his labor for guest right. He wished for strength in the fields and water in the well, not that they would prosper in wealth, but rather that their fears should die, and they would never want. At that time he knew joy tending to the animals which were kept, for they knew nothing of death and war. Yet all Eoland was now in chaos. 2 months after Alice had left his home, word came of the crimes of Adelwitz and the Uncoltabar. Fire spread through the land, and the menfolk with whom Ellis stayed left to join the gathering hosts. Ellis feared his blood was in danger, and so in the night he snuck away and went searching for his family. The great host of united Tella, the Unsalal, Unbolam, Unlondar Norna, Ungol, Unkantara, and wee Arden joined the wee Agla, so the host swelled to the thousands and marched to the walls of Ar el Salam to demand the daughters returned. But in their hearts they desired secretly to see their foe laid low, so that he could no longer hold himself so high. The great host set their plan to burn that great city to embers, and from there to march upon the Uncoltabar and free themselves from the tribute the High Teloch set for them. They began a siege, a manner of war which the Aeolish were unaccustomed to, yet as they began assaulting the walls in piecemeal fashion, the Hawk King prepared the relief of the city. Teloch Etheldor called for his servants to assemble a warband, though in size it was to be outnumbered by the host arrayed against them. But he had fewer than he had hoped for the Drocht Ballon would not leave their lands for the warning of Kellach, and of the Unlondar, which he subdued, came only the weak and unwilling. He would harshly punish his son, who had brought upon his people such danger, by stealing children and women from their home in deceit. But it was for him to discipline. His blood was to be guarded from others. None could spill that blood without feud. 3 of his sons were with him as he prepared, having completed their proofs for kingship. Edrioan went into the wilderness and brought to his people 15 wolf pelts and 5 bear pelts, slain by his own hand. Emmerich had walked the shores of the Aeolish Sea, and there dove for pearls, becoming capable of holding his breath for great periods of time, so long that his companions thought him drowned and lost forever, in all bringing 100 pearls as a gift for his father. The youngest of his sons was Ethelwald, 12 years of age, and who had not left his people, rather telling his father that his gift to the Uncoltabar was his life, and that he would not ever raise his hand against his brothers. Whichever was chosen would be his Teloch. The numbers too few to give battle, the Teloch sent those gathered with Edruan and Emmerich to learn the number and manner of the enemy, as the otter rode through the land to each home to gather more. With his 2 sons walked 2,000 men. Great secrecy was maintained by that band, for they knew not their foe's strength. Upon any hillock, foragers and scouts of the enemy could spy them and raise the alarm. As elder, Edruan was their chief. The band stalked through the dells by night, coming to the lands about Ar el Salam unnoticed. Edruan sent his brother Emmerich to the camp of the enemy to learn their number. He, with 5 warriors in disguise, gained their entrance by the fires of the Ungol, who had not set guards at night. In the night they walked round the entire city wall, counting each man they saw until they knew their number. A full 10,000 faced them. Emmerich then sent away those warriors with him, that his brother would know his foe's strength, but he remained. Under the guise of a lame camp follower, Emmerich learned the rhythm of the host, offering his labor to them, sowing and fetching water from the river, each day observing as bands would walk the camp, gathering men to assault the walls. He would lash together ladders for those doomed men, for it mattered not the number nor valor. They could not capture the walls. Too stoutly were they defended, and each night the labor of Emmerich burned in heaps below the ramparts. In his heart hope bolstered him, for he saw that so many, so unaccustomed to the practice of siege, could not ever take their prize. Soon summer would die its reckless death, and in fields hands would be as rare as gold. If by the great fortune of his father they might hold, then there would be no need for the Unkulte Bar to give battle, sons and fathers spared. When the great host broke apart, their wrath would cool and never again kindle. Wars would begin anew among the many Tella, and his people would be saved. He was therefore resolved to leave the camp and return to his brother, and keep him from any action. By night he prepared his leave. Moonless and clouded, he walked beyond the fires of the camp and into the fields which stretched until the woods. Yet as he crossed those fields, a commotion rose within the camp, whose source he could not discover. Fires leapt, and the joyful sound of metal striking metal rang. Emmerich hid himself in the grain, watching carefully as the camp erupted in cries, swarming as bees when the hive is struck with rocks. Emmerich had seen many battles between the warriors of the gathered Tella. Old blood feuds born in battle or raids do not die among the Eolish, though in word they were united. The men, bitter at their failure to take Arel Salam, fought each other for revenge, for food, for frustration. Men would slay each other in duels born of a moment's rage, or else use cunning. Some of those who lay to sleep rose no more. So finally the blood boiled between the Tella, and a confused melee began. And as the sounds of battle were carried about the plain, Emmerich heard a separate sound. In the soft sighs of the wind, rustling only as she breathed, there was another. Careful as a wolf pack they crept, drawing ever near. Drawn by the commotion of the camp, the band of his brother, who had so long kept themselves hidden, came from the southern hills, knowing the moment of their attack. Their faces blackened with mud even in the moonless dark. Even the flighty Unlandar were bravely prepared. Any man is brave when he strikes unseen. The men came slow, until at last they were but a short leap from their foe. Then the trap was sprung, and with great clatter and din they arose from the grasses and fell upon their enemy. Yet soon the alarm was raised in every camp, and the great host scurried to their arms. As the battle waxed, those within the camp who battled with each other became aware that their foe was upon them, and set aside their feud, bringing all their force upon the band of Edrioen. Soon, too, did reinforcement arrive, a band of the Unsalal, and at their head the hunter, in mail black and woad on his face, crashed into battle, and none stood against them. Reckless was he, carrying no shield and holding a great axe, rending friends and foe alike, their blood running down his face like sweat. All the number of the camp now pressed against them, till those who fought for the Unkulte Bar were forced to flee, but in good order. Emmerich chose to return to the camp of his foe, to learn of that fierce warrior and dissuade further assaults. In guise again, he slipped easily back into the camp as warriors gathered at the battle. He sought the Telach of the Ungol, whom he had served, and found him wounded in the thigh, his retainers tearing rags off their clothes to stem the bleeding. Emmerich limped into his tent and commanded them to be still, with such authority that they ceased, though their Telach still writhed in pain. He sat beside the king, and with a bone needle closed the wound with such speed and skill that to those there it seemed he had the power of the Baith. He then placed in the Telach's mouth the bark of the willow, and demanded that he be given quiet. The retainers left the tent, and Emmerich was left alone with the Telach, singing a soft song to pull his mind from his pain. A runner came with word for that Telach. The kings of the host were joined together for council, and the Ungol were needed. The Telach gathered his wits and conquered his pain, but needed aid in walking. Emmerich lifted the wounded chief and together walked through the camp. The men held their arms close, and the dead remained strewn across the camp. There, in the place where the Unkoltabar had attacked, the Telochs had gathered, some bloody and others unmarked. At their arrival, the Telach of the Unkontara, Findara, spoke. Long have I wondered why our foe, whose son we have caged, has not come forward to give us battle, if the wind still lifted the Hawk King to his prominence. And as each day passed, I believed that their army would not come to this place. It is proper that thieves move in the night, for such cowardly peoples that would steal children and women would shame the sun. Wife-taking was ended by the Malach, our war just to remember his law. Those who work in the shadows are known to be weaker than those who do war by day. So I would thank Etheldor for his battle. He has told the Tella assembled that he cannot give battle by just means. It would be well of us to leave this place with our host and find his warband. How many of his peoples can he bring against us, when our host numbers more than all his Tella? Shall he even bring his women to the defense of his vile son? We must leave this place and march against those forces that attacked our camp. By our victory over them we shall break their power in this land, and at our leisure return to Ad el-Salam. They will not deny our revenge, and surrender that villain when his father is broken. We need not waste more time before these walls, which we cannot take. Our victory shall come from open battle. Few Telochs spoke in agreement. Their pride demanded that they not flee the field after victory. But also each of them had come for the desire of plunder, and to humble him that named himself High Teloch. When the Teloch of the Unkontara had ended, Teloch Rololoch Gwynner Dwi of the Ui Agla spoke from his fear. We are each Telochs of proud Tella. No one is set above the other. Not since the death of the great King Malach have we knelt, nor shall we kneel to any other ever again. Free now for all time. My Tella, my family have been assaulted by one of our number. I cannot submit to one who has committed such acts of rapine, nor, I think, would any of our proud number submit. Who can act when a Teloch upsets Eoland? Clearly it is to be the other Telochs of the land. I thank you for coming to my defense, but I beg you not to leave this place of justice to find so small a force for the joys of battle. I fear with every passing day that horrible violence will be visited upon my children, and in your flight you shall permit the man who betrays me and all tradition of guest right held by the Eolish to flee his cage. I cannot leave this place, for it would admit failure before all the Eolish, and the abandonment of my family. Our victory comes when Adelwitz the traitor is dead and my children returned. Here your reward will be greater than in the fields of Eoland, for the wealth of Ad el-Salam, built over years of trade, will be yours to take, far more than that which you would strip from their dead in open fields. Do not flee from your failure. Let us take the city and proclaim our victory for all to see. The many Telochs gathered agreed to stay. The gold and linens gathered behind the walls weighed on their mind. Yet they knew not how to take their prize, and debate broke out for how to mount the walls. Here, though, not a Teloch, the hunter spoke, awarded his place for his victory. I have seen war in many forms, but never the slow wastefulness of this host. Walls cannot be taken by sloth. Our victory shall not be secured by patience. Why does our host fight in this manner, so unaccustomed to the Eolish blood, when our warriors desire the heat and sweat of battle? Of all the men of Eoland I am the greatest warrior, unconquerable in my might, and should you seek proof, look about you. Have you ever seen men so humiliated in death as those I rend? But my power irresistible cannot slay those behind walls. Let all your host assault the walls at daybreak, no man spared, and we shall have victory. I shall myself take the gate if all the city battles upon the walls. At nightfall the morrow we shall revenge the wee Agla and bring safely home his children. The haughty son of the tyrant shall bleed his lifeblood upon my axe. But we cannot then disband after one battle, for what father would not seek to revenge himself upon those that slew his heir? We are all here gathered for the rage of a father that has lost his own. Can we break camp and go to our homes before a final victory which ensures this will not happen again? Would the Hawk King not pursue us in our fractured bands all over Eoland and slay us piecemeal for what we will do to his son? We must remain as our mighty host until the power of the Unkolta Bar has been broken and they forfeit all claim to the place of Mabebd and vengeance. We together shall secure the freedom of our lands for all time. At his finish, the words captured both camps, those who desired the riches of Ar el Salam and those who wished to see the power of Etheldor broken saw use in this first humiliation. They went to their warbands, preparing great siege ladders large enough for 5 men. Through the night no man slept but labored. In careful numbers they reached the forest edge and there cut many trees. Edruan and his men made but small uncertain war upon them, fighting and fading, worried of pursuit from the camp. Emmerich worked among them, tying the rungs and preparing arms. All along the walls the men of Ar el Salam stood prepared, watching them, and slowly the camp fell to silence as their labors were complete, until the appointed hour for the charge came as dawn rode into the sky. Shot, missile, and dart fell thick among them. Many fell before reaching the wall. More still lost their arms beneath the hacking axes as they climbed. Again the charge was stalled, though they had so many thousands. Yet as the war waxed about the still waters, the guard on the gate gave their succor upon the walls, and the hunter came there, bare and unarmored, in his arms the trunk of a great tree, broad as a man's chest and 15 rela long, hewn by his own hand. 10 men came with him to wield it. Each stood opposite him. They began their slow business. Even with the irresistible might of the cursed wanderer the walls gave but haltingly, well built and studded with iron, and as they battered the wall men came, drawn to the noise, and raised the alarm. Swiftly came the men of Ar el Salam to that place. Dart fell thick upon the ram as the gate began buckling, ravaged by the ram, a rabid wolf clawing at the door, desperate for the slaughter which lay beyond. All but the hunter were felled by fierce dart, the ram falling silent as hands fell from it. Yet its work was done, let free by the eager hunter who brought up his axe and hewed the last resisting wood to kindling, as about him fell useless the arms of Ar el Salam. No dart dared touch the darkness. In strode the darkened one, bound by terrible curse. Into the poorly led city he came, and behind him flooded the host. The assault upon the wall ceased when word came that the gate had fallen. Few risked themselves in battle for the wall, but rather gave to desire. Doomed to swift death were those who came down from the walls, in vain hope seeking to stop the advance. For with his great weapon the hunter slew his foes with ease, taking no notice of their lives but reveling in his strength, till swiftly the gate was won by the host of many Tella, and Ar el Salam faded to fall. In poured the armies of Eoland, and the war ended. The city surrendered to despoilment and fire. The still waters churned muddy and dark. The hunter stalked the streets. About him the fires raged. Thick smoke billowed snake-like above. The sky turned dark, and he wrought no work but slaughter, with axe or hand, joyfully taking the lifeblood of those who came across him. The reavers brought to humiliation Ar el Salam, but he still searched, sparing neither friend or foe, until he came on the final band defending the city, and with them Adelwitz. Here, where the city fathers gathered behind the shield wall, their captains held them fast as the tortoise moved for the gate. In the midst of their circle, the children of wee Agla. The raiders did not come against them, for they saw no easy treasure. But the hunters saw only gain, and came against them, hewing their shields and hacking at their legs from beyond the reach of their arms, till Adelwitz came forward, commanding his men to continue their march, and gave battle. He came forward in wrath, forcing back the blood-stained hunter, and with his shield pressed against him the axe would not swing, wounding the dark twice. As the dark ichor fell to the earth, the hunter abandoned his arms, and with hands bare sought to crush his prey. Becoming lithe as smoke, more wild did the sword swing, but no blow would land on him as he began to beat against the shield of Adelwitz. His irresistible fists hammer blows against the wood. Wearied, Adelwitz hid behind it, no longer battling with sword, seeking but to survive. Long had he stood against the hunter, their feet turning the blood and ash to muck. The fire leapt gleefully about the city, and the terrible screams of the embers in their collapse were the death throes of some mighty beast. But the tortoise had not gotten far, being slowed by their wounded and the age of the fathers. They could reach no gate unguarded, too few in number to force their way, and cowardly without their captain. Adelwitz had no strength remaining in him. His legs gave way under the assault. Exhausted in the mud he lay as the hunter retrieved his arms. The headsman's axe was stained with blood and mud, or else danced with the fires about them. Not able to battle any longer, the Telach's son watched unmoving as his death came to him, sword falling from his hand, shield laying useless beside him. The hunter came to him, and without a moment's pause brought end to the life of the well-travelled but greedy son. The hunter hastened to the shield wall. The wounds left long trails in the dirt. His hands too bled, but his strength did not flag, growing more terrible as the day wore on. Easily did he kill the guard of the elders, brushing aside the branches as he prepared to fell a mighty pine. The band was slain to a man. He then set about the slaughter of the elders of Ar-el-Salam, and as the city which they had led to ruin, they were humiliated in death. The hunter had them surrender their clothes and cut their beards before he slew them, but he would not wield his axe. Instead, with the sword of Adelwitz and his bloody hands. Ragnach was killed beneath his boot as he begged ceaselessly for mercy. Then he turned to the frightened family of Rolaloch Gwynner Dwi, licking clean his axe and sword as he eyed them. Bloodlust was on him, the need to rend flesh, and the darkness which was laid upon his heart yearned to feast on them. Yet there was still some small part of him that was a man, and he knew that to keep the host together he needed them to live. So the hunter threw aside the sword and led them safely from the city. The city lay dying, and the sky wept ash as the host retreated. They watched the flames devour every timber, shocked by the violence which they had done those people who had been their disgraced kin, but kin nonetheless. No slave was taken, no child spared, no woman who was not outraged, none left among the living. None would know peace and rest beneath a mound. Every man looked at his heart and the heart of his neighbor and saw it tainted. Ar-el-Salam was long in dying. Her embers glowed for a month. The whole city razed, and her people lay strewn across the ground. Naught was left of the city but ash. No people would go there again for shame, and in time the forest would claim it. The still waters would again fall quiet. The hunter brought safely from beneath the cloud of death his wards, and brought them to the camp of the wee Agla, to joyful reunion between father and daughter, husband and wife, till the great war chief was reduced to tears, as through the camp a cry went up, the only joy in a mournful field. The hunter watched carefully for his moment, fearing lest the fire of their rage would die, until the Telach Rolaloch was in happiness complete, and he spoke to him. Hail, father of family rejoined, let this sight reign supreme in Eolish memory. No heart untouched by your tears, nothing is closer to the Aeolish than a family living in peace. Gaze upon your children's face, and know they were unharmed. Rejoice in your lover's touch, and fear no harmful hand. Look out to the fields beyond me, and see the host of all Aeoland which has come for justice. Know that that justice has been fulfilled, and revenge satisfied. For I myself sought out your daughters, and slew him that had abused guest right. Damn his name from memory. Telach of a great people, you owe a great boon to those who have delivered so for your cause. Again would they have failed without my arm, their lives wasted and your children in captivity. Victory assured by me alone, and to me shall fall your gift. Remember now this debt, and prove the greatness of the wee Agla. The Telach was angered by such greed, and would have brought forth his sword had not the blood-stained figure of the hunter loomed before him so large. So he spoke to him in feigned gratitude. O warrior of a lost people, there is much that I owe to the host assembled, a debt so great I cannot pay it full in all my remaining days. Yet with our victory assured, and at the utmost exhaustion of arms, he which first comes for reward is no king of great Tela, rather him with no home. When he might have secured for himself treasure from a rich foe, he instead returns with naught and requests it of a poor king. Let none say of me that I am ungrateful, for the joy I now have is greater than my despair. Very well, I shall give unto him any boon which he desires, should it be in my power. But for one, I shall not permit any man in the world betrothed to my daughters, though he pushed my people to utmost desperation. So, warrior, what would you ask of me? The hunter had desired such a match, but at its refusal asked that his boon be the mighty Telach leading the wee Agla in the van as they pursued Etheldor the Hawk King. This the Telach promised to do in the utmost power. As morning burned into the sky, it was diminished by the blaze of Ar-el Salam, which raged undimmed. The host of Tela followed the wee Agla in search of that band which had assaulted them, but Edruin and Emmerich were by that time gone. In search of their father they went, having watched weeping as the city of Ar-el Salam died so horribly, cursing that their meager arms could not save the city. So ever south did the host of many Tela march, tempered in their bloodlust, only ever falling to violence among themselves, but never against those which they came upon. A shame festered in their hearts, and they began to hate those they marched with. Rivalries new sprang with each mile. Those bare few of Ar-el Salam that lived made their way down the tumbling water of Aglach Ulmo until they found a bridge and crossed it, thinking themselves safe. They followed Aglach Ulmo to the sea, and there found a small fishing village whose people were exiles, same as them. The haggard settled there and lived in peace with the villagers. A wall they raised, and they kept a watch for those that had harmed them. This new city they named Teldrim, which is hope. Ellis left the farm where he worked, as about him all Eoland seemed to think only of war. He desired only that the Aeolish remember the peace. So while he moved through the land, he gave the magic of the flower only where he found the needy. Coming thus to the Aglach Ulmo, he found the river dark and swollen. Ellis, gazing at the muddied water, knew that which must have passed, and spoke to the empty air, knowing that she heard him. Child bright, true Telach of all things in this land, I fear this is our parting. In the tainted Ulmo I do see that great tragedy which has befallen your kingdom, and I must go to its remedy. In my heart I feel a great threat to my family and Tela. To succor them I must now go, to aid them with what meager arms I have according to the duty of a son. Ilulian, you have in you such sadness immeasurable I would not wish upon the cruelest war chief, which I could not bear myself. Worse still is your awesome power given to you so young. Fate has decreed you no ordinary child, but one that shall decide all things to come. In the little time I have known you, I have come to learn my true place, but I hope that you have learned yours. Man is small. Only the smallest hope exists for him to rise above want and pain. He cannot do these things alone. A strong and good Telach can guard him and guide him until he sees that to which he was blinded. This can be done by you alone in all of Eoland, you who have seen them starved and walked their fallow fields. In such low condition man must be pitied. His poor character is not the natural order of his soul. You must see with eyes clear his true nature, and lift him till he stands in his good place. For what purpose have you been given such strength is beyond all my knowledge, but I think it unjust to use it for another's war, when it might instead be used to end the pains of all your people. Understand, Elulian, and forgive me when I beg you remain in the land of your father. Learn well your strength, that when the day comes you shall become Telach. Fear me not, for I must now go to secure this land to the great promise of your coming. Go and gain power irresistible, until in your 15th year I shall join you and the Eolish redeemed. He set aside the flower, and when it touched the ground it withered. He followed the river north, seeking to learn truthful tidings of the land, still garbed in his humility and without arms. War unending moved through the land, and though in his guise secure, he knew not if he would be challenged by the war parties, the signs of their violence writ large through the land. Yet even as the trees and fields were marked by their passing, he did not want for food, finding the plenty of the forests better than the hall of his father. The lands were heaving in war. The guard of the Unkoltabar, led by his brothers Edruan and Emmerich, were near him, harassing the scattered bands of the great host of Tela as they searched for the Hawk King. Ellis knew not how near they were to him, and continued his path north along the river, keeping to plentiful forests. At the shores of the disturbed lake Aglas Salam he came to understand the war on the island, for there he came into the camp of the Unsalal, who had marched there down the shores from the ruin. He made himself seem as the poorest of Eolish and desperate for succor, but they gave naught to him, uncertain of his Tela. They were buoyed by victory and certain in further prestige, haughty in denying him food, humiliating him as they ate. Ellis had learned of their number and strength, desiring to remain no longer but to find his brothers and aid them, yet as he left their camp he was set upon by the hunter, who travelled with the Unsalal as the guest of Noreen, the Telach's son. For though he had been humiliated and starved by their hand, the cruel warrior would not permit his leaving, declaring him to be his thrall in final disgrace. Ellis did not submit, but instead pushed past, continuing in his journey. This affront was that which the hunter desired, for his proud cruelty now demanded that men pay homage to him and serve his whims. He then rushed after him and slew him as his back was turned. Thus died the kind but timid son. The hunter returned to the camp, calling the warriors of the Unsalal to come witness his cruelty, but when they were roused neither body nor blood was found. In the lands between the Aglach Ulmo and the hills of Isle Bolam was the burning war. With the coming fall harvest the great host searched for the brothers as they slew the loose forage parties. Edruan and Emmerich did great damage to them, as word reached to the host that the Hawk King Etheldor, with all the men of the Unkoltabar, was coming to join his sons and give fierce battle. Runners went through the war bands, calling for the host to march as one to victory, or else be defeated alone. Together they gathered, till they found their number to be 8,000. Many deserted since the fall, and others perished at the hand of the brothers. But the large host once more marched to battle. The reunion between Etheldor and his sons was joyless, for all the host combined numbered 6,000, too few in number against such a large host. With them was the otter and sparrow, and Kellach also from lands unknown, unwounded but weary. The Telach had brought with him his youngest child, Ethelwald, who had refused all birthright to serve truthfully his people. Though he was but 12 years of age, he was raised in manly arts, and knew his place in the shield wall. They knew of the burning of Ar-el-Salam and the death of Adelwitz, but none knew where Elis was. The imperious Telach demanded battle in revenge for his dead child, but the captains about him were uncertain. His sons Edruan and Emeric began the council. Father, and captains in all lands renown, we have gone to war many times, and though in experience less than those gathered here, and in our leading of the van we have fought against the terrible host arrayed opposite us. We have won 40 battles against our foe, and lost but one, that which cost our brother his life. Victory in this war cannot be won by battle. This much we know, their number too great to overcome. You have taken all men from the fields who can walk, each child that can bear his own arms. Here with us is Ethelwald, of character true, but of years few. How will he stand when the lines meet in the crush? How might they? Father, how can we win a pitched battle? Return them to our homes, and permit us with our van to hold your foe in place, until in time they are forced to make peace. We shall grind them to dust before they find us, and the island shall remain as it is, their host returning to separate lands. To this the Otter rose in agreement. The veteran men he had led to battle made less than a third of the Unkoltabar band, and unsure of victory he spoke. A good father raises wise children. Here is evidence of your own talent. These young captains have proven their worth in a campaign more glorious than the conquest of Malach. Telach, we are outnumbered. Too few of our warriors have seen battle. Some have never seen it. Of those men who I have led to battle there are now too few. I am of a mind matching your sons. I can lead those glorious veterans in bitter delaying action and gain you time. But do not lose your Tela in pursuit of glory. You shall not have it. After the council of those 3 captains came the soothing sparrow, who sang before the battles of the otter, and he spoke calm to the Telach. Adelwitz your son has died, and the other, Elis, has vanished from all knowledge. With the 5 children blessed to you, 3 stand still before you. It is their blood that is still warm. Place not the future of your people in vengeance for the dead. We do beg you to spare the many lives brought to this place for the faults of Adelwitz, who though brave did act with malice. The war is ended in their revenge. They will not pursue us far. Their war is not with you, but with your fallen son, and there let it remain. Leave and make peace. As his captains each gave arguments, the Telach listened in rage half concealed. When they finished, Kelach refusing to speak, the Hawk King gave them his mind. Adelwitz, my first, a great warrior of our number, did act foolishly in the halls of another while lusting after my hall. He could not see that his life was forfeit when he stole so much from his host. Yet I am still grieved by my loss, though he has endangered my Tela. No other Telach claims to rule as I do. The subjugated people of the Unlondar pay me tribute, and the Drocht Balon recognize my power. I am beyond their petty power, ruling as I do more than they could desire. Truly am I named High Telach, second in all Eoland behind only the great Malach. My justice extends through all our land, more powerful than the law of others. No Telach might judge a man of my Tela, much less one of my blood, by the virtue of my strength. For the justice I give by virtue of my rank is more true than what can be given by others. The judgment of my son for his crime was reserved for the High Telach, above the right any man holds on my island. Never have I judged poorly, and in truth I would have stripped him of his right to inherit my seat, returning to the good Telach of Wee Agla, his children unharmed. But this was meant for me. And what of Elis, who has vanished? doubtless slain in the turbulent tide that rules Eoland. His blood was not theirs to take from me. This, then, is our just call to war, one which demands to be sated, the defence of the high Telach, who shall not die in betrayal, but in peace instead, and of his son Ellis. I shall not send from here men, though you fear their skill in war, for every arm is needed in our shield wall. In our number are such warriors that will inspire them to victory. Your orders are set. We march now to battle. Kellogg had not spoken, nor had he assented as the captain spoke, but as the words of the Telach ended, he advised him, understanding that which would come for the king. What poor people are we Eolish, who can read naught but in blood? A happier people would we be if we spent our time in learning according to the dream of Malach than marching to war. The storm which Malach dreamed of is coming, growing in the east. It will soon wash upon these shores. Fight, king. You can do nothing else. It is your blood. None here has the power to change you, not even had they each the tongue of the sparrow. Your mind fixed forever. Yet march not to battle with all hope placed upon victory, with all your blood risked in singular battle. Give to your youngest, Ethelwald of honor pure, the ring set upon your hand, the signet of the true high Telach, for safe keeping, that should you fall in battle with your sons, the Uncoltabar shall not perish for want of a Telach true. The Hawk King refused to part with that which Malach wore, and commanded the warband to battle. So the battle came to be as the mighty bands met in the gentle fields between the river and the hills, terrible in size. Etheldor placed his men before a grove, and the men of the Unlandar who he trusted little were placed on the left upon a gentle knoll. With them he placed Kellach and the otter to hold them firm. There too came the sparrow, for he preferred the company of his friend the otter in the heat of battle. Kellach had brought with him Ethelwald, that he might protect him. The brothers Edruan and Emmerich held the right as glorious chiefs in war. They had decided that upon victory they would jointly appeal their father to be Telachs together. The center of the band was held by their king, who had been wise but now stalked the line in a madness. The host of their foe came to that place well ordered. Their number was not made of the elders, children, or cowards, but of young warriors and true, well versed in manly battle. They did not order themselves according to their tella, but having found the foe which they had for so long searched, the opposite line formed quickly and charged. Fierce was their meeting, both shield walls well formed, so their clash was that of thunder. Where Kellach stood they had success, for the storm of spears floundered as it went up the slope. Long did the two lines push against each other, the crush so terrible where they met that men slain could not fall to the earth. But though they had in number thousands more, the host of the Tella could not overthrow the well-led line of the Uncoltabar. For 2 hours they battled. The great line of the Tella would withdraw when it stalled and charge anew. 7 times they charged until the sun had reached its zenith, and as men rested and prepared for their 8th battle, the hunter came to the fore of their line in the place without honor. Against him the brothers good. The charge sounded, and he rushed against them with all the boundless power captured in his blood. He reached them first of the wave which rushed to the shore, a battle cry so fearsome that the wall wavered, and Edruan, seeing peril, rushed forth to meet him. About them the lines again crashed, but bowed where they battled. Men on both sides watched the two warriors, the hunter fierce, and Edruan the wolf skinner, by maneuver and might whirled about the other in a dance so skilled and passionate they were as lovers. The hunter battled with axe and shield, swinging both to wound his foe, where Edruan had spear bright and keen. Carefully he battled beneath his shield, stabbing at the feet of his foe to off-balance him. Edroen never permitted close battle, knowing his spear useless if they were too near, staying at the edge of the ring while the hunter rushed and charged from the center. Virtuous patience guided him, and he was not wounded, but gave wounds to his foe instead, twice upon the thigh and once in the wrist. Yet here the hunter laid his trap. Remembering the death of Adelwitz, he let his blood spill on the earth around them, pushing Edroen against the circle where he would be rebuffed, forced unbalanced back to battle. Once more he wounded the hunter, but that warrior kept him against the shields of the host, where warriors watching did push him, but never against the Unkoltabar line, that they might not aid him. As the blood of the hunter wet the ground, the brother's feet slipped, and he fell. Chance never passed the hunter, and he hacked at the fallen chief. Enraged, Emmerich burst from the lines and claimed the warriors of the host had violated single combat. He rushed the wounded hunter, hurled a spear as a missile, which pierced his side as he butchered Edroen. Emmerich drew his sword, ramming into the hunter, throwing him to the dirt. He saw his brother was maimed but not dead, assuaging his fears, and he fell upon the hunter as he struggled to his feet. His rage revenged itself upon his foe until he returned each wound that fell upon his brother. He claimed victory and rescued Edroen, carrying him to their lines. All through the field the cheer was lifted, but before reaching safety so too did the host opposite cheer. Emmerich knew not why, till in turning the hunter had risen unwounded, bathed in black blood but strong. A javelin loosed from that hand went through the eye of Edroen and slew him. Thus died the able but late son. Emmerich cried aloud, and the cheer died among the Unkoltabar. The bulrush came with axe swinging, but Emmerich could not put down his brother to swing his sword. The hunter crashed his axe upon the helm of Emmerich, and he fell, still holding his brother in his arms. Thus died the skilled but cautious son. At the sight of their dead chiefs the Unkoltabar began to break, running to the safety of the forest. First the right ran, and then the center. As he saw his men flee, the Telach Etheldor called to hold firm, but upon learning his son's death, he understood his own was at hand. He gave the ring to a runner named Dalbrecha, that Ethelwald would hold the ring and be Telach after him. He then ran the line, demanding they rally. Around him the men held, but beyond them a rout began. The Unlandar fled off the knoll to their lands. Kellach, the otter, the sparrow, and Ethelwald with ring on his finger fled in that way as well, for in receiving the boon they thought the king perished. The small guard about the Telach fought as wolves undying, not permitting a man near the Hawk King as they moved for the trees, hoping to escape, all while he called for his men to join him. But when the routed men had left the field, they were alone against all the might of Eoland, and were slain. In the bloody field a weary cry of victory was raised. So complete was their conquest that the Tella began then to return back to their home. Men walked through the dead, stripping their clothes and raiding their camp. The hunter stalked the lines and found the hated king. But though he was slain with many wounds, the ring the hunter sought was not there, nor upon the hands of the two brothers. He ordered the search for Ethelwald, but the many young who died in the field slowed the searchers. Enraged, the hunter demanded each man of the host present him with their carrion. But the rats refused and fled his wrath, and though he slew many there, he found it not. With their foe dead and freedom secured, the host broke, fleeing the hunter who remained to search for his prize. End. Book 3. The Ring of Dain Thar Duin was written and performed by Michael Frutig. If you have enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting the project on Patreon. Supporters get text files of each chapter, as well as access to Q&A posts, other writing projects, such as flash fiction and chapters of other works. Go to patreon.com/michaelfrutig for more. patreon.com/MICHAELFRUTIG. Thank you.